So ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Key Nations webinar series. Today, we are very honored to have two very strong experts in terms of operational excellence with us, Clifford and Peter. Clifford and Peter, would you like to take this chance to introduce yourself to our participants?
Okay, I'll start. Thank you. This is Cliff Lee. I'm with Octagon Value Chain, and I'm really here to help to be a facilitator, moderator of this webinar. So I would want to have us all get right into this rather fabulous presentation that Peter Evans from Lego is going to have for us. Peter, as an OPEX professional, I've known Peter now for a few years. He has really, in my mind, is one of the top thought leaders in the OPEX space, and has always been an extremely open and pleasant person to deal with. He has a delightful personality, always enjoyable to hear him speak. So Peter, I'll hand it over to you, and everybody, I hope you enjoy his presentation.
Thank you very much, Cliff. I really appreciate the introduction. I'm flattered by it. I'm not sure I deserve it all, but it's very nice of you to introduce me in that way. Yeah, as you can see, I work for the Lego Group. Very proud to work for the Lego Group. I've been there now for 4 years, having spent the previous 3 years with Maersk Line, also in Denmark. I'm actually based from home in what is today a very sunny mid Wales. That's not that usual, but on top of that, we sometimes have to suffer some rather flaky broadband. So I hope that things survive the journey. What I'm going to do is try and move the slides forward. There we are. What I want to do is spend a very, very brief moment on who we are, but actually, it's some of the aspects of that are very important to what I'm going to try and say here. So I hope you'll bear with me. This is by no means an advertisement for the Lego Group. I think we do that well enough on its own, beside aging OPEX people like me. So I will spend a little time on that. I'll also spend a little time on systems thinking, and I'll share some caveats around that as well. And then some stuff we're doing in business service operations, which is where I mainly function these days, and how we're taking that journey forward and some of the things we're trying to do. And as we go, of course, I will touch on current situation and my perspective on that. And actually fairly short, early on, I'll share a little bit of my perspective on that. I guess, as you can imagine, being part of the Lego Group, sometimes these things are a little different. My wife says that Lego is a gift to me at the end of my career. One, I don't have that much intention to quit right now, but secondly, sometimes that gift comes with some pay. So I have to make sure that I get things right, and I work very hard for the Lego Group with pride, as I said. So our mission is to inspire and develop the business of tomorrow. And I don't think there's ever been a time where some of that has been more important. And we can see that because we see a very strong connect, even in these very difficult times. And that's both gratifying, but it also means that we continue our responsibility for our product excellence and for the quality of what we're delivering and for the benefit we think we bring to the world by our existence and what we try to do. A couple of little fun facts for you. Basically, if you took 6 2x4 Lego bricks of the same color, you would find 915 million ways of putting those bricks together. We find in accounts payable, it's about as many opportunities as there are for error in a process as well. So no, not seriously, but that gives you some sense of why we think Lego and the Lego brick works so strongly in the community. because in a child's hand, there are absolutely 915 million ways of doing it. Child's hand, there's so many more. We're also, by the way, the largest tyre producer in the world, with some 700 million plus tyres a year made by the Lego Group. Of course, they don't come close in specification to your average road running tyre, but I thought you'd perhaps enjoy that little fun statistic. I wanted to talk a bit about my approach before I go a bit deeper into the presentation. One, because it gives you a bit of a deeper insight into the way I think and the way I work. And two, I think I've been extremely lucky in my life of being in the right place at the right time on a number of occasions as I've on my learning journey. But also I have the opportunity working for Lego Group to really apply some of the things I deeply believe in and try and make a difference that way. So I strongly believe that the best way to survive any crisis is to stay true to your established principles, framework, and activity, and not to compromise on those. Now, when I say never compromise, I mean, clearly there's caveats to that. You know, if life was in danger, if those other things were there. But in general, I think that these, particularly in these current circumstances, the easy thing to do is to kind of switch off and say, it's okay, guys, just get on with life, and we'll meet again in 3, 6, 12 months time, or whenever it is, and we'll start again. And I think that's exactly the wrong thing to do at this time. And I've seen and I've been actually overjoyed to spend a fair amount of time in huddles, kind of virtually going into the Gemba, watching these things continue to work while people are working from home with their kids on their knees, with their dogs barking, with all those other things going on, and still maintaining the progress that we've made over the last couple of years, or 2, 3, 4 years in my part of the business. So I think those things are very, very important. I think that this is the time when companies with a positive culture, and Lego Group is certainly one of those companies, you can absolutely leverage that, and where necessary, lift that to another level, because we can continue to learn and learn and learn. And that's so, so important in today's world. And it gives us the chance to lift it above. I don't think, one of the, I always thought Lego culture was great, but at the point when in Billund we were going to shut the new campus and all our offices, then the first note that came out wasn't, guys, make sure you continue working. The first message that came out was, guys, we recognize now that your children will be at home, your spouses will be at home, your partners will be at home, and therefore there will be times when you will have other attention, and nobody expects you to break that when we all accept that families come first. And I see so many times people say people come first, culture comes first. But when you're in a company that lives that, it becomes obvious that they really mean it. And I think what I see in every opportunity is leadership taking the opportunity to make sure people understand how safe it is to be where we are at the moment. I know we're privileged because we're a company that's doing rather well, and we're a company that's continued to do that. But even so, I think it makes such a difference to where we're going. Of course, that means an increased focus on well-being, being even more connected, lead and taking part in the fun, being openly empathetic, and trust our teams of people to work out how they balance work priorities and family and personal needs. And in my own team, I have a team of about 17 people. We have a team site called Working at Home, but Not Alone. And we have a daily doodle where we all play and do some art. We have quizzes. We have jokes flying around. We have serious work stuff flying around, all in the same place. And we connect all the time. Very, very important part of what we're trying to achieve now. Let me move on a bit and talk a bit deeper about the Lego brand framework. And I should have said at the start that I will try and leave some time, 15 or more minutes for some questions and some discussion at the end, if I can possibly do that. The whole thing for us is based on what's called the Lego brand framework. This has been around for some time now. You will probably know in our history that things got pretty grim in about 2003-4. We went through some significant changes, new leadership, but in terms of the things we're trying to achieve, a lot of those things have really never changed and had very minor updates. Lego is not a company, the Lego Group is not a company or a business place where you see the values plastered to the wall. You test those values by the way people behave and the way people act. And in fact, when we're recruiting, or if I'm recruiting, I do most of the technical stuff over the phone. And when we meet, we talk about fit, we talk about how culture, because those are the things that really, really matter. I talked to you a bit about our mission and a clear vision around being the global force for establishing and innovating learning through play. The idea, of course, which is the system in place, so how all of this stuff works together, our values, and very importantly, our promises. So that joy of building, pride of creation, mutual value creation with our partners, which means that we do try and pay all of our partners on time. We do try and act in the best and most and the right way. Of course, we're working very hard on our planet promise and things we're doing there. And of course, for our people, it's about succeeding together. The spirit of only the best is good enough is really powerfully important to us. Now, sometimes you could find that slows us down a little bit. And so we're careful to kind of balance between experimentation and moving forward and making sure by the time we get to a final result it's a good one. So that's always a balancing act for us. I think what's also important to know is that 25% of the profit in Lego Group goes to the Lego Foundation and is invested, therefore, in a whole bunch of charitable deeds that you may see around the world. You'll see it in LinkedIn, you'll see it in various places, but some very, very big things where we put a lot of the value of the business back into the world. And we so strongly and passionately believe that as a team. That says as a group in Lego, of course, it's pretty easy to be connected because those are things that most people can get their arms around and feel comforted by, but also feel a very strong part of. So that's one of the reasons why we are so connected in the Lego Group. One of the things that's really, I've actually gone back to it, slightly accidentally, I have to admit, but back in the 90s when I was in GE Capital, the book Fifth Discipline by Peter Senge was basically mandatory reading for leaders and leadership development. And I kind of read the book then, found it a bit hard going and put it down and didn't really go back to it until last year. And I went back to it last year because although I always kind of had these beliefs clear in my head about the way I wanted to move forward and the way I wanted to do things, I kind of got put off a bit by, as most of you will know, in the OPEX world, we live in a world where there are many people here, I'm sure someone called today, who believe that basically there is only one tool and that will be either Hoshin Kanri or whatever it is, or Carter or whatever it is, and they will believe that's the only way to do things. I've never fundamentally believed that. I was very lucky, I think, because when I joined GE Capital, I joined before Six Sigma existed. And at that time, we were using a thing called change acceleration process, which was all about making change land, helping change land through people, change management, if you like. Now, you could argue there's no such thing as change management, and what there is change facilitation, but that's another long discussion. The reason I kind of went back to system thinking was a couple of things. One, we had some tools that I'd seen when I joined the Lego Group, which hinted at it. But for me, there was always a nagging thought that something fundamental was missing. And secondly, I was actually asked to make a presentation with an ex-colleague who wanted to talk on this subject. And of course, the inevitable happened 2 days before the conference. He backed out and I thought, bloody hell, I better read the book again. And so I ended up back here. But these principles for me are so, so important. the personal mastery piece around clarifying, deepening our personal vision, the mental models. So really working out where those assumptions are, and doing all the things you can do around those to make sure that you really start to understand how the world is influenced. Building a shared vision, of course, and that comes very deeply into my strong belief that the ability to tell stories and to take people on journeys is really how you get connection in this OPEX world. Team learning, which is so important. Of course, if you're not learning, then you're not standing still. You're in the modern world, you're going backwards. And of course, the fact that fifth discipline integrates these together. So the subtitle of this is actually building a learning organization. And that's the most fundamentally important piece, I think, of why we exist, and why people like me are doing what they do. It's certainly not for the glory, but it's certainly for the opportunity to build that learning journey and continue my learning, often through the learning of others. Simply put, let me just build something important here. What we often think of when we're in business is actually, maybe the build is important, let me just flip back, is the body corporate. We think about the business and we think about all of the things that make the business work, the systems, the architecture, the machinery, the Excel spreadsheets and everything else that makes it work. But we rarely, we also have a thing, we talk about people, we talk about well-being, we talk about those things. But the reality is the system don't work unless these two are working very, very closely together. And actually, if any of them are suffering, both sides suffer. So in their sweetest spot, when things are really working together, then the human individual, which includes their mental and physical well-being, is so as important as all of the systems and all the machinery and everything else that lives underneath it. And then, of course, if you bring that together with a vision and mission that everybody buy, which is so strong in the Lego group, then you can't help but have a system that's at full power. And, you know, as with all societies, when you live inside it, you know, people complain and reality, it works. And in reality, in Lego, when all is said and done, things work very well together. So, and I think the piece underneath it is something that has inspired me, particularly as I'm well into my 60s now and thinking about my future, is what is my purpose to impact? What is it that I can bring? And I think that's about unleashing the angels inside the stone, and that comes from Michelangelo and his strong beliefs in that world. So that's kind of where I come from on all this stuff. I think you have to have all of these things aligned, and you have to have all of these things working together. And a bias in any one area creates problems for the whole system. So for Lego Group, and I hope these slides and sound are working okay for everyone. In Lego Group, then it's quite straightforward, really. We actually used to have X matrices and stuff like that, and we went through a fairly massive organizational change a couple of years ago. Some of those things dropped out, and my initial reaction was to be worried about it. But actually, when I stepped back from that, I actually realized that in the main, we have such strong connectivity that we are holding those things together, even if we're not using the spreadsheets anymore, at least some of them. And if I take you back a year and a half or so ago, then the year started with the owner family talking about their vision, reinforcing the Lego brand, talking about their vision for the next 5 years or so, or the next 10 years or so, and where they wanted the business to go. That was very quickly followed by our CEO, who ran a fabulous session with a couple of his colleagues, talking to the whole of Lego Group about how that converts from what the owner family said to what that meant to us. And then, of course, to for my area, our C-suite leader for that area, which was Chief Transformation Officer at that time, now the CFO. And he also then took that the next level down for our organization. And then my boss, Morton Lilliland, took that to a further level for business services, so that we had all heard the same thing 4 times, made more and more real for our area. Every single one of the people in our area be assignments before we even got to showing them charts about exactly what we were going to do next. That gets transported then into a improvement plan, and everybody in our piece of the business knows the headlines on that plan and the key things that they're involved in, and that's how we stay connected. So from that point onwards, it's not that difficult to connect a whole range of other things when we start to talk about operational excellence, because you can make a place for that in each of the 4 key elements of our program. To show you in a little more detail, we take that a little bit further. So on the top line there, you see something called BSO strategy, business services operations. That's the part of the organization that I currently work in. The headlines of energize everybody every day, drive demand, innovate for the future, strengthen foundation, align exactly to the Lego Group strategic plan. And of course, you could say, when you just look at the headlines, that probably every business in the world has something similar in there. The key thing is that you keep talking about it, and you keep talking about it in a very positive way. So you never let these stories drop. And then below that, I've shown you one of the areas that reports to me, which is around service and service management. And here we're talking about service mindset and tone of voice and how that impacts across the 4 lines. So we're constantly connecting. And the more we do that, of course, the more people hear it, the more natural it all becomes, and the easier it is to be there. So line of sight is critically important in any operational excellence journey. The other one, and I'm sorry for the number of words on some of these slides, this is something that I've believed in and followed for quite some time. Not least because it was a model that was designed by my wife and her colleagues in Capgemini back in the 90s, which is where it originally, at least this version of the model originally became. And this is what I use with my teams and what I try and use with all teams that I'm working with. The key thing, of course, is in the middle, which is the performance challenge. So what is it that makes us get out of bed in the morning? What is it that makes us tick? Now, if you're a sports team, that's relatively easy. You want to score a goal. You want to score more runs. You want to hit more home runs. Whatever it is, that performance challenge needs to be articulated. And then there are 4 key areas around that matter so much. One is around relationships, and then knowledge, then discipline, and then ownership. And you can see this all breakdown. These slides will be available to you at the end of this. So please don't be scribbling too hard to get there. This model matters very much to me. And within my own team, then people in my team share aspects of this model and work on it for the whole team. And we bring that together in each of our meetings so that we're constantly talking about how are we doing against our performance challenge, but also more as important, what we're doing around relationships, knowledge, discipline, and ownership. And all of those things together set you in a good stead for other things that you're trying to do. So let me kind of slightly pause, and then I'll get to our operational excellence journey. First off, everybody talks about change and change management and all these things. But the first thing to think about is, what is this all about? It's about humans. And what we know is that all perspective is individual. This came from Kierkegaard originally, but and you would say, well, that's obvious, right? But you constantly hear things like, there's no I in team. Well, I'm sorry, but there are I's in teams. Every team is made up of I's, and everybody has their own perspective. And if you think that that perspective disappears somehow magically when they walk through the door, you know, the same as in some companies where I see people kind of expected to hang their brains up next to their coat when they come into work. Well, that's not actually what happens, right? So all perspective is individual. All change is situational. And as a change lead and as somebody who's trying to architect a journey and describe a journey for people, we have to understand that for each individual in that journey, their situation is different. It could be anything from short-time stuff like a really bad night with the kids or the dog's sick or whatever, to something long-term. They're going through, you know, they have a serious illness in their family. They're going through a life change themselves. All of those things make a difference to how change has happened. And so my argument all the time is that change happens across your people one by one. So in my world of 420 odd people in PSO, then I believe that all 420 people have to be addressed, and we have to find ways of doing that, both one-on-one, team, whole team, regions, whatever it is, it has to work. But what we have to do is get to a point where we have a consensual journey. We agree where we're heading, and we are all on our journey to get there. And that becomes easier in a company like Lego because we are so connected from top to bottom, because we do understand the mission. We can do the JFK piece in NASA where, apocryphal as it may be, he asks the janitor what he's doing, and he says he's putting a man on the moon. I can tell you that people that work with me believe their job is to put bricks into the hands of children to help the learning and develop the builders of tomorrow. And that's got nothing to do with paying an invoice or chasing a customer for payment or doing any of those other things. That's at the heart of what we're trying to achieve. But of course, we don't all need to go at the same pace, and we can't all go at the same pace. If you believe the things above that sentence, then you have to believe the pace changes, and you need to be flexible enough to understand that and move forward. But we all need to get there. So the goal is to build a learning organization, back to the system thinking piece, not herd thinking. And the danger, of course, with herd thinking is we all charge off in the wrong way. I can tell you, I don't know if you've read any of the books by Matthew Syed. He has one at the moment called Rebel Thinking, where he talks about diversity. What he's really talking about is diversity of thought and culture and all those other things. I do strongly recommend it as a great read, but as a great read for OPEX leaders, because, you know, sometimes I've seen it myself. You know, I've been in an organization with 20 or 30 guys around me. We all believe the same thing. We all can't believe and shake our heads when somebody isn't following it. And in reality, we've done the most fundamental mistake, which is we've forgotten the people we're trying to work with. So let me tell you a little bit about business services. We start basically in 2016. We had finance offices, HR back offices all over the world in many, many countries. We have offices, I think, in about 70 odd countries. We had individual finance people, we had HR people, we had a whole range of things there. And Lego took for it was a very big decision, which was to kind of close those individual tasks down and bring them all into a central organization. And so we built a new organization, which is based now in Billund in Denmark, is our headquarters. We have about 60 or 70 people there. And then in Kladno near Prague, in Singapore, and in Monterey. And it was built from the perspective of scalability, i.e. helping Lego to grow. And we now are at about 420 people in all. When this first decision was made, about 100 people were affected, most of whom I believe are still in the Lego group in one form or another. But we had to start to think about what this new organization did, and we had to move it on from there. We have some key elements for success within that. Of course, we want to reduce risk. We want to increase scalability, i.e. Do more as the Lego group grows. I'll talk a bit more about that in a minute or two. Stakeholder intimacy and service excellence. And the last two, particularly in the kind of back office world of Lego, really didn't exist. And that it depended then on the individual. And, you may have had a good relationship with Elsa in Billund, and therefore you got things done. But you may also have had somebody else in Billund, let's call him Thomas, and Thomas might have been a completely difficult person to work with, and you never got anything. And that's kind of how it worked. So we had to do something about that, and we had to really think hard about how we wanted to do it. We also recognized that in order for us to be a success, we need to be clearly in control of the things we did. The key controls, the risk analysis, the compliance, and the mitigation needed to be in place. And although there's kind of culture around that in finance worlds generally, particularly to be in control, was something we had to work very hard at. We wanted to have quality, and for quality, you have to have standardization, and you have to have a CI culture. So people are used to the idea of improving. And we had to have a mechanism for bringing services in to our area, and of course, change management, and so on. And very important for us, of course, is around our customer mindset, our stakeholder intimacy, and our service mindset, and having those things working very, very closely with the operational staff to make sure that we deliver on all of our promises. So the partner promise is massively important to us, both from a people point of view and from our customers. And we started to draw pictures. And my boss used to say, "Oh my God, Peter, this is so simple. I mean, why would you show this picture? It's so obvious." But the problem is that it's, as often with very obvious things, they're very easy to say and talk about. Actually, when you look at it, they're not really happening. So it's very, very important for us that we are very clear that strategy, targets, all those things come top down, and that performance management, i.e. how we get things done and how we build that connectivity with our stakeholder and all those other things have to happen bottom up. And the performance of our services need to become visible. Actions are taken by the right group and problems are solved at the right level. So we needed to get that in place. And although there have been years of what's called LCI, Lego Continuous Improvement training, what I found is we'd had many people who've gone through training, but we didn't have very much change, and we didn't really have people who deeply understood what it was they were doing and why they were doing it. So we had people who would follow the rules because the LC guy had told them, and they had little cue cards, for instance. So in their performance meetings, they would ask the cards of questions. But actually where you ended up with is it was a bit like a religious service. So the preacher at the top, the leader of the meeting, would start the meeting and he'd pick up his card of questions. And the first question is, what is the target condition? Although in my head, it sounded like, what is the target condition? And the audience, the congregation, if you like, would respond, we don't have a target. And then they carry on. And you think, oh my goodness, right? We are missing the point so badly. So we had to rethink and go back and start again and really rethink where we were going. So drawing pictures became massively important, and telling stories around those pictures is massively important. And so if I tell you the base story for this first, and then I'll go on to what it really means from an operational excellence point of view. At the bottom of any mountain range, just about anywhere in the world, maybe in the desert it's a bit different, but just about anywhere in the world, at the bottom of the mountain range is where all the water connects. It's called the swamp. And if you're a swamp dweller, you probably don't even know there's a mountain. At best, you're trying to keep your head above water and you're trying to survive. But if you manage to get out of that, and if you're ambitious and you say, oh, I've heard this amazing journey and there's a place called Base Camp that I could get to if I wanted to. And if you were fit enough, and if you had the right equipment and a really good guide, you could probably make it. I think most of us, who are in reasonable sound body and mind, will make it to Base Camp, unless you're unlucky with something like altitude sickness, but you will make it. The difference is Base Camp, things change dramatically. So you've made it there. You now meet a whole group of people because you want to climb to the summit. And we know that only a world-class climber or a world-class idiot will try and climb Everest on their own. And so you have to create a group of people to work with. And while you're there, you acclimatize for 4 to 6 weeks. You meet all your new people. You have a higher level guide with you. You learn new tools. You learn you gain new equipment, new climbing equipment, new technology. And then eventually you start on your journey up to the summit. And if you're lucky enough to get there and lucky enough to get back again, you've achieved your journey. Now, if you convert that to a thought in terms of tools, well, the swamp's the place where you find it hard to describe who your customers are. You don't really know what they want. You don't measure anything that relates to what they want, even if you did know. And you certainly don't know if you're capable of meeting it. That I would describe as a kind of operational excellence swamp. Basecamp is the place where you can not only answer all those questions, but you're in control of all facets of your operation. You can measure things. Everything's visible. You can make rudimentary or small change improvement. You have methods for identifying that improvement. You have leadership stories that help you work together on key elements. People are taking joint responsibility for a whole range of things. And of course, the climb to the summit means very much higher level tools. So if anything, lean and those sort of tools will get you to base camp. But lean alongside some more high fluting Six Sigma and other analysis tools will help you get to the summit. So there's a change in methodology and there's a change in knowledge, and the journey becomes harder and harder, of course, the steeper you get. But let me try and describe that to you in a slightly different way. And again, I apologize, there are a lot of words here. I'll try not to read them all. Swamp to Summit provides a motivational journey. And it's a mechanism for describing operational excellence. It's not a precise measurement tool. And I've found in many organizations that people get completely bogged down in the matrix of how it's described, whether that's a EFQM matrix or a CMMI or any of those things. And they forget actually what it is they're trying to do here. So it's not, in my view, a precise measurement tool. It helps BSL, in our case, deliver excellent services to the LEGO group to improve stakeholder centricity, improve scalability, improve motivation. The elements within the scope are fairly standard. Many of you will see things like this with customer and stakeholder, value, true leadership, process and performance management, people competencies and engagement, and problem solving and continuous improvement. Our target is to reach Basecamp as soon as possible. I think we're pretty good at a lot of stuff we do, but I don't think from an operational excellence point of view, we're anything close to consistent enough. And we have a long way to go in some areas with visibility and with a whole range of other things. In other areas, I've seen some of the best administration team models I've ever seen in my life here in LEGO. So it's a good place to be, but there's a journey here. What you get from my team, service and performance management, is a diagnostic exercise, so we understand where we are. The co-development of a plan, co-development being massively important here. The capability support and the coaching and guidance along the journey. And what we need from them, of course, is commitment, open minds, willingness to learn, and leadership behaviors. And those things are so, so important to where we go. And of course, if we don't know where we are today, how do we know how far we have to travel, right? As I say to them, none of you go on holiday by jumping in the car and saying to the family, right, where are we going, right? You start with a fairly good idea of that. You certainly know where you're starting from, and then you can work out. And if you don't know where you're starting from on this journey, how could you possibly know how to improve? So a very important part of that diagnostic piece, that consulting piece at the start there is so important. And just to kind of add a little bit more to it for you, the foundation is around knowing our stakeholders, their needs, accountability to answer problems, those sort of things. And we've been running a whole bunch of different interventions around basic lean service awareness. We partnered with a company called Reinvigoration to help us with some e-learning at the front end. So everybody, particularly in the delivery area, but everybody across BSO has been through that training. So I took them right the way back to the start. About 80 people have been through lean leadership and specific and relevant tools and capabilities. The level is understood or is on the way to being understood across the teams. You can't do it all at once. And there are only very few of us actually in my team to help with that. So the journey takes a bit of a time. When we get to Basecamp, the foundation is really owned by the teams and the individuals involved. We can control flow and service. Skills are understood and managed. Processes are understood and their capabilities understood alongside it. Standardized, confirmed, all of those things. And of course, at the summit, then we're trying to develop world-class improvement culture. And we strive for excellence in the full value chain. Long way to go for us. And we don't kid ourselves that this is a long journey. But the commitment that you need is in place. As I always say, somewhat cornily, I guess, this is a simple story about breakfast. And if you believe that breakfast is made from bacon and eggs come from a chicken and bacon comes from a pig, well, the chicken is involved, but the pig is committed. So we have to be very committed. We have to be pigs for this. We really have to start that journey. And I can tell you that we have some leaders within BSO now who are absolutely committed and are not using an awful lot of help from us at the moment to get their team to Basecamp and maintain that. And so there's a whole bunch of stuff there that helps you on the journey. The capability development, well, a little more on that. E-learnings completed by about 380 of our 420 people, lean competency, problem solving, OPEX management system. Last year, we trained 72 colleagues in lean leadership, the next level up in the lean competency system. And in 2020, COVID has delayed us a little bit, but we have some courses running on some of the tools in more depth for the teams. And we're going to move people onto lower level Sigma for some people, more or less starting now. The commitment I talked about is so important to this. Let me just build it. I'm sorry there's so many builds in this. Swamp, of course, heavy commitment from the team to get going, but a lot of support from my community, my team. Now, we don't have anybody in the Swamp. We have a lot of people who are somewhere between Swamp and Basecamp. And so my team are very heavily involved, coaching, capability building, helping them all the way. I attend, I try and attend a minimum of 5 to 10 huddles a week if I can. I can't always do it. Last week I attended none. Next week I think I've got about 20 I'm going to go to. So always there, always helping, very supportive, always using supportive language, finding ways for people to develop by helping them understand for themselves where they are and where they need to go to make the next steps. And of course, as you get higher up the mountain, the support from people like us moves away, and people are much more autonomous and much more running their own gig. And we're really there for higher level interventions and maybe some projects from time to time. So how can this possibly go wrong, you think? Well, couple of things. First, of course, lack of constancy of purpose, which brings us all the way back to my starting statement. So, well, you have to keep consistent. So I have not dropped, and I will not stop talking about this because we know that it makes a difference. And my experience from other companies shows that it makes a massive difference. Going quiet is a very dangerous thing to do. And we shouldn't kid ourselves that today's agreement is tomorrow's agreement, because it almost always in business is not. So you keep going, you keep talking, you keep adjusting, and you keep moving forward. So in a summary, of course, you have to build a picture of where you want to go. Connect your picture to the whole business, find your compelling story, turn leaders into leaders and keep telling the story. Of course, deliver on it relentlessly. Don't forget to celebrate. We do a lot of that. And of course, keep it real. Because if you start to use language that your business won't recognize, then you lose them almost immediately. I think that's it. I apologize for the background. My dogs have got very excited because the sheep have come down into the field, but hopefully you can still hear me nice and clearly. And I think we have some time, 10 minutes plus, sorry, for some questions if any are out there.
Thank you very much, Peter.
You're welcome.
Would like to invite everybody to post your questions. And just to start, Peter, I wanted to quickly ask you to change management, since that's one of my favorite topics these days with is there any specific change management methodology that you employ in Lego?
There are a number of methodologies out there. Lego has actually moved away to some degree from insisting people all follow the same path. So there's quite a bit of ADKAR out there because a lot of people were trained in that a while ago. We actually have a central change management group who have the Lego way of making change. And you would recognize some ADKAR in there, you'd recognize some Kotter in there. I myself was brought up in change acceleration process, which is a Kotter-like approach to change management. But the fundamentals of that are all about understanding and commitment to a journey. And the tools become the adjunct to that and help you along that journey. So I'm kind of quite cautious around that stuff. And my first reaction when somebody pulls out their favorite toolkit is to get slightly worried that we're going to just fill in a load of templates. So I like to see my people really connect.
Well,
sorry, let me just...
no problem. So Ariana, do we have any questions for Peter?
At the moment, the questions have not come in, but I'm happy to encourage everyone to type in questions. I guess everyone has been paying attention to the presentation. So let me prompt.
Exactly. Also, so while that prompting has happened, one more question here for you, Peter, which is I particularly am interested in the lean methodologies, and you'd mentioned that both Lean and Six Sigma, and obviously let's talk about Lean Six Sigma. Has Lego incorporated, or to what extent has Lego incorporated Lean Six Sigma into its continuous improvement processes?
So Lean has been around for quite a long time. It started about 12 or so years ago with Lean in the factories, Lego production system. You'll be surprised to hear, driven by some consultants, most of them out of or very close to Toyota. So a lot of Lean in that environment. There is Six Sigma and Lean Six Sigma around, depends on where you are. In Monterrey, Mexico, for instance, I can tell you that in the factory there, they're using Sigma methodologies to drive what they call rapid improvement events. And so there's a whole range of methodologies around. There is no one defined Lego methodology, and that's what I guess gives idiots like me the space to play and to do it.
And so as a follow-up, is there any problem with that inconsistency or non-standardization of approach, or do you find that there's a richness to the mix?
I think there's a richness now. When I joined, there was quite a strong LCI hierarchy, and there was a lot of pushback around a whole range of things, around the approach and a whole range of stuff like that. We've actually been allowed to do something more autonomous now, and interestingly, I'm finding interest in what we're doing in some other parts of the business and not in others. Strong tradition in Lean, particularly in our European factories. Very strong tradition in Lean there. Mm-hmm. Actually, in all factories, to be fair. And I applaud that. Absolutely the right thing to do. And I do strongly believe that This first came to me when I was in Virgin Media. So I was recruited into Virgin Media to bring Six Sigma. And after a month there, I was asked to comment on or to tell them what my plan was. And my answer was, you can't have Six Sigma. And you can imagine my boss at the time, it was either going to be a very short career or we were going to have an argument. And my boss kind of looked at me and said, what? And I said, but you can't count. And if you can't count, you can't do Six Sigma. So why don't we learn to count first? And I think Lean helps us on that journey quite a long way. And once we can count, then we can start to do some really important things with Sigma tools. I was brought up in Six Sigma, of course, with G Capital. I'm a very strong believer in the power of those tools, but I'm also a very strong believer that they have to be right place, right time.
Yeah, likewise, brought up within the DuPont company, which I think
yes,
step in step with GE with regard to Six Sigma. One of the mistakes, just as a point of clarification here for everybody, one of the mistakes I think that has been made and certainly was made in my prior employer was the fact that we became disconnected with core financials and oftentimes became more focused on the output versus the outcome as it related to important strategy or financial performance. So how do you handle that particular issue in Lego, Peter?
In a number of different ways. So we care hugely about benefit in the work that we're doing, but unusually for a shared service organization, our number one key driver is not reducing cost. It's actually increasing efficiency and effectiveness. And I can tell you that in BSO, our productivity has grown by nearly 25 percentage points over the last 2 years. What that means is we've not recruited many more people over the last 2 years, but we've taken on an awful lot more work. So we tend to measure in that way. So it's not the number so much for us. Having said that, we're going through an exercise right now around our digital journey. And of course, we're talking about what the benefits are and what we're going to bring to it. So we don't forget it, but we're careful about the way we talk about it. I don't want to make it a numbers game. I can tell you in my part, I won't say which company, but in my past, one company I joined had only one measurement for OPEX, and that was how many green belts it had trained. And that for me is about as useless as you get.
That's an output metric, which is useless. Totally agree.
Yeah. So we find our way, but productivity is important for us. Net Promoter Score, our internal NPS, we started when we kicked off a couple of years ago at -19. We're now at +20. So we know that what we're doing matters. We've moved it 40 points nearly in 2 years by getting a whole bunch of things right. So I believe we have our finger on the pulse. We have a pretty good balanced scorecard around that stuff. And I'm supposed to be part of that because we're in finance as well. So be balanced is what I'm saying, and don't get over fixated on any one quadrant at any one time.
Okay, fantastic. So Ariana, any questions that we have for Peter?
Let's wait for about a couple of seconds. Maybe, one just came in. Okay, that's a question from Carla. She said she's concerned about their customers and their satisfaction. They run a small online shop for young children. Should she shift the benchmark and raise their operational cost in order to still meet the demands so that they could still be in business and keep the efficiency? I guess with the current situation, a lot of small businesses are being affected. So cost is definitely a very big concern for the smaller business owners.
Yeah. And, I think the last thing I would do is take financial advice from me. So let's start at that point. But what I would say is that I firmly believe that to a couple of things. One is that continuity of supply and trust gets you through an awful lot of stuff. And if that sometimes means that you have to do some things with your costs that in normal time you wouldn't be so keen to do, then I think you need to work out whether that's doable and whether it's sustainable. And it may be that there's some short-term things you can do that help you through that journey. I also don't think you should stop looking at your base processes and the way things work and finding ways to take some cost out while you're doing that at the same time. So removing waste from your processes and doing those things. So that's kind of where my head's at on these things. I wish I was good enough and clever enough to give you a great answer. But my view is if you want to still be in business, you have to find a way to stay in business sustainably. And if that means sometimes taking some hits, then you do that for the right reasons. And if you can get that right in your mind, then you haven't damaged your balanced scorecard too much. What you've done is got some very thankful customers. And our belief in Lego is that grateful customers come back.
Okay, Peter, due to time, how about this? Shall I redirect all the questions through email?